The Museum of Unchosen Lives. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday Daniel Sato had already forgotten. It appeared between a school notice about his daughter's astronomy trip and a reminder to repair the kitchen window. No sender, no seal, only an address beneath the old Continuum district and a sentence printed in gray. One of your lives has requested an audience. Daniel read it 3 times before deleting it. The message returned before his thumb left the screen. He had spent 14 years designing temporal instruments for Continuum, and 9 years pretending he had not. He knew the language institutions used when they wanted curiosity to outrun caution. He also knew there was no museum beneath the old district. The transit maps showed geothermal storage and abandoned flood tunnels. At dinner, Anna noticed him looking at the invitation. "Work?" she asked. "Something that thinks it still is." Their daughter Leo sat across from him, building a lunar city from pieces of bread. She was 11 and had recently decided every adult secret could be opened by silence. Daniel watched her wait. "An archive wants me to verify an old record," he said. Anna held his gaze. She had met him when his life was made entirely of sealed rooms and unfinished sentences. "You come home afterward." It should have been an easy promise. Yes. Rain had covered the city by the time Daniel found the address. A narrow door stood between a pharmacy and a closed cinema. Its brass plate read Museum of Unchosen Lives. The letters looked older than the buildings around them. Inside, an attendant scanned his hand without asking his name. The lobby resembled a public archive. Pale stone, low light, no clocks. Water murmured behind the walls. "First visit?" the attendant asked. "This place is not licensed." "Neither are most regrets." She gave him a black admission token. It displayed his birth date, then several other dates he did not recognize. "What is this museum?" "The Continuum Probability Archive, Public Designation Museum of Unchosen Lives. We preserve coherent personal branches after they fall below enactment threshold." "Simulations?" "No. Simulations begin from what we know. These were once futures the universe expected." An elevator carried him downward. Its floor indicator moved through letters instead of numbers. Near, lost, impossible, restricted. The attendant introduced herself as Curator Evelyn Rook. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair cut close and the measured posture of someone accustomed to delivering irreversible information. "Visitors may observe," she said. "You may not speak to an exhibit, touch its interior, or remove an object. Nothing you see is an instruction." "Then why invite me?" "We did not." The elevator stopped at near. Beyond its doors stretched a gallery of dark glass. Behind each panel a life moved silently. A woman blowing candles beside children she did not have. An old man accepting an award for work he abandoned. A teenager stepping onto a train while another version of him had stayed home. Daniel's token warmed in his hand. At the far end of the gallery, a light appeared behind a door marked restricted. His name formed on the glass. Daniel Sato. Below it, another line emerged. "In this life, you saved the world." Daniel walked toward his name. The gallery lengthened. Doorways unfolded between him and the restricted exhibit, each carrying a date from his admission token. Evelyn stepped in front of the first. "The museum does not permit visitors to begin with high-pressure branches," she said. "You need calibration." "I need an explanation." "That is what calibration feels like before it becomes grief." She touched the wall. A door cleared. Inside, a room held a breakfast table. Daniel recognized the chipped blue cup his father used, the pattern of morning light from their first apartment, and a radio that had broken when Daniel was 8. A boy sat at the table doing mathematics while Daniel's father cooked eggs. "This did not happen," Daniel said. "It nearly did. Your father declined a job in Osaka in this branch. You grew up with him until age 16. The boy laughed at something beyond the exhibit's frame. Daniel heard no sound, yet remembered the joke. Not imagined, remembered. The sensation entered him complete, carrying the taste of burnt toast and the private annoyance of being loved too closely. He stepped back. "Memory induction." "Resonance," Evelyn corrected. "Your nervous system and his share a causal root. Proximity allows information to cross." Other visitors moved through the hall. A woman watched herself close a hospital door before a diagnosis. A soldier stood before a life in which he had refused an order. Nobody cried dramatically. They held railings. They sat on benches. They learned how ordinary devastation looked. Why preserve this? Daniel asked. Continuum once believed discarded branches simply decohered. Then people began remembering events that never occurred. We found pressure accumulating around lives with unresolved causal energy. The museum stabilizes them. Like radioactive waste. Like history without a country. They passed a classroom where Daniel had become a teacher. He saw himself kneel beside a child struggling with fractions. The exhibit Daniel looked tired and content. Another door showed a small apartment where he lived alone. Another showed Anna crossing a station without noticing him. In one, he had married someone whose face the glass blurred because Daniel had never met her in the enacted world. Every exhibit delivered a thin memory, a key in his pocket, a winter argument, hands he had once expected to hold. The details were not better than his life. That made them harder to dismiss. How many? He asked. For you. The walls brightened. Doors continued beyond sight. Millions above preservation threshold. Billions more too faint to render. Then every choice creates this. Not every choice, every self capable of recognizing the path it did not take. At the end of the hall, Daniel's restricted exhibit remained visible but no closer. The heroic caption waited beneath his name. Who requested the audience? Evelyn examined his token. The request originated inside your branch. Exhibits cannot communicate. Correct. But this one did. That is why you are here. The gallery shifted again. A new door appeared directly beside Daniel. On the other side, his mother was alive. Keiko Sato was 68 in the exhibit, 14 years older than she had ever been. She stood in a greenhouse tying tomato vines. Gray threaded her hair. A scar crossed her left wrist where continuum surgeons had opened an artery and reached her heart in time. In Daniel's life, the ambulance arrived 6 minutes late. He had been 29 on duty at the Meridian Array, watching probability waves travel backward through a test chamber. His mother called twice. He silenced the first call and missed the second. By the time he reached the hospital, a nurse had folded Keiko's ring into a paper envelope. Behind the glass, she looked up. Her eyes found him. She cannot see you, Evelyn said. Keiko removed her gloves and walked toward the barrier. She is looking at me. She is looking at her son. Another Daniel entered the greenhouse carrying groceries. This version wore a continuum field coat. He appeared older than Daniel despite being the same age. Keiko scolded him for buying the wrong tea. They argued with the efficiency of people certain they would have time to repair the argument. Memory struck Daniel, his mother's hand against his cheek on a cold platform, her voice saying, "You do not owe the future every hour of your life." The smell of soil in her kitchen. He gripped the rail. What choice made this branch? Evelyn brought up the record. You answered her first call. I could have saved her by answering a phone. You would have noticed her speech was impaired and sent medical support. Yes, the brutality of the answer emptied him. Let me speak to her. No, one sentence. She is not your mother. You just told me these are not simulations. She is a real consequence attached to a different Daniel. If you speak, she may understand that her world is an exhibit. Daniel watched the other version kiss Keiko's forehead and leave. She returned to the tomatoes, then paused at the glass again. On a shelf behind her stood 12 birthday cards addressed to him. The museum let their contents enter as memory. One complained that he never called. One enclosed a recipe he already knew. One said she was proud of a paper he had not written in his world. Love had not become profound because death spared it. It had remained repetitive, irritating, and available. Daniel had spent years polishing grief into something cleaner than the relationship itself. The exhibit returned all the unfinished ordinary days he had mistaken for guaranteed time. Does he save the world? Daniel asked. No, he leaves Continuum 2 years later to care for her. What happens to everyone else? Nothing exceptional. It sounded like absolution. It sounded like accusation. The heroic branch had required his mother's death. Perhaps every celebrated life hid such an exchange. One unanswered call converted into focus, grief converted into ambition, private failure refined into public purpose. Keiko pressed her palm against the barrier. Daniel knew it was projection. He raised his hand anyway. The moment their palms aligned, the gallery alarms began. Light raced beneath the floor. The greenhouse flickered into dozens of versions. In one, Keiko was in a wheelchair. In another, she had never forgiven him. In another, Daniel died before her. The museum displayed not one preserved branch but a tree struggling to reopen. Evelyn pulled him away. "I did not touch the glass." "You did not need to." The exhibit recognized intent. Keiko's branch dimmed. Before it vanished, she mouthed a word. Daniel could not hear it, but every memory crossing the glass translated it the same way. "Go." The restricted door at the end of the hall opened by itself. The route to the restricted gallery passed through a concert hall. Daniel stopped at the sound of a piano. This exhibit had audio. Hundreds of people sat beneath warm lights while another Daniel performed onstage. He wore black, his hands moving with a confidence Daniel had never possessed outside equations. As a child, Daniel had studied piano for 11 years. At 17, he won a place at the National Conservatory. The Meridian Institute offered him a temporal physics scholarship the same week. His mother told him either choice could become a life. His father told him only one would become a career. Daniel chose physics. Inside the hall, the final chord faded. The audience rose. Applause crossed the glass like weather. Daniel felt it in his ribs. He remembered cities he had never visited, hotel rooms, reviews, and the exhausting hunger to deserve the next ovation. Then a woman appeared backstage, Anna. She carried flowers but no wedding ring. The musician Daniel embraced her. Their affection was unmistakable and incomplete. "We still meet," Daniel said. "Some people are high-probability intersections," Evelyn replied. "Do we marry?" "No, you choose the tour. She chooses not to wait." "Leo." The curator said nothing. "Where is my daughter?" "Leo's adoption required your marriage, Anna's work at the Harbor Clinic, and a storm that closed the Eastern District. Remove any link and the meeting does not occur." On stage, the other Daniel bowed again. The memory of applause expanded until the gallery seemed too small to hold it. Daniel thought of Leo practicing trumpet badly in the kitchen. Her first month in their home, when she slept under the table because beds felt temporary. The afternoon she asked whether adoption meant adults could unchoose children. He had told her no. The exhibit offered him beauty, mastery, and a life free from the administrative debris of parenthood. It also contained no evidence Leo had ever existed. "Turn it off," he said. "You asked to see. I am finished." The hall dimmed, but the applause continued. It followed them into the corridor, mixing with the museum's water pipes until Daniel could no longer tell celebration from rain. "The restricted exhibit will be more persuasive," Evelyn said. "It was built to be." "By whom?" "We do not know. Its architecture predates the museum's public charter. You run an archive containing an exhibit you did not build. Continuum runs many institutions that began as discoveries. They reached a security threshold. Daniel's token dissolved into light and passed through the door before him. Beyond was a circular room with one exhibit. No glass separated it from the gallery. A city stood beneath a clear sky. People moved through a memorial plaza around a statue of Daniel Sato. The inscription gave the date of his death, 19 years from now. Children placed white paper birds at the statue's feet. A guide spoke to them. "Before the Meridian collapse, humanity had 12 minutes. She said, Daniel Sato gave us a future." Every child turned toward the present Daniel. The heroic life had begun watching back. The exhibit opened around him. One moment Daniel stood beside Evelyn. The next he was in the memorial plaza beneath sunlight warm enough to feel on his skin. The museum remained visible as a pale rectangle behind him, shrinking like a door carried away on a train. "Extraction line is stable," Evelyn's voice said through his token. "Do not follow anyone beyond the plaza." People passed through Daniel as if he were a projection. Their city was cleaner than his, quieter, threaded with gardens where roads had been. Above the skyline, towers bent light into a faint aurora. The guide continued her lesson. The collapse began when incompatible probability systems entered resonance. Every predictive network started producing mutually exclusive outcomes as physical events. For 12 minutes, the world contained too many futures. The children knew the rest. Sato closed the meridian. At the memorial wall, Daniel found names from his enacted life. Continuum colleagues, neighbors. Ana Ruiz Sato, temporal relief coordinator. Her date of death was absent. She had survived. Relief loosened something inside him until he searched for Leo. No record. He queried the public archive. The system found 43 people with similar names, none his daughter. Daniel searched adoption registries, storm evacuations, Anna's family records. Leo's birth name appeared once. Leo Marin, deceased, age 6, Eastern Harbor surge. In Daniel's life, Anna had been at the clinic that night because their marriage placed her near the harbor. She found Leo trapped inside an evacuation bus and refused to leave her. In the heroic branch, Anna worked at Continuum headquarters. Nobody reached the bus. The perfect future had saved billions after failing one child 4 years before disaster arrived. Daniel searched for the Eastern Harbor inquiry. The heroic government had classified the surge as an unavoidable regional loss. 42 children died. Their names occupied one buried page beneath thousands of later memorials to Meridian. The branch had not concealed the deaths. It had reduced them through scale until no individual choice appeared responsible. Daniel recognized the technique. Continuum reports often made tragedy look like weather by widening the frame. Daniel tried to close the record. The archive opened another. He saw himself in a Meridian laboratory, older and gaunt, standing inside a ring of white light. Anna argued with him through reinforced glass. "You promised this was containment." She said, "Containment failed. There are too many active branches." "They are lives, Daniel. They are possibilities. That is what a life is before someone chooses it." The recording ended. Evelyn ordered extraction. The plaza dissolved, but another Daniel remained beside the statue. He was older than the recording, dressed in a simple gray coat. Unlike everyone else, he did not pass through Daniel. "You found Leo," the heroic Daniel said. "Daniel could not breathe. Exhibits cannot speak. You keep saying that as if rules survive observation. What are you? The life you abandoned before it began." The museum door widened behind Daniel. Evelyn shouted for him to return. The older man looked toward the memorial children. "In your world, the collapse begins in 41 days. They will ask you to choose again. This time choose everyone." "What happened to Leo?" Pain crossed the older Daniel's face with practiced precision. "One child is not the world." Daniel struck him. His fist met solid bone. The plaza shattered. Daniel fell backward through the extraction door and landed on the museum floor. Evelyn sealed the exhibit behind black glass. His knuckles were bleeding. From behind the barrier came 3 slow knocks. Continuum officials arrived before Daniel stood up. Deputy Director Elias Ward entered with a medical team and 6 security officers. Daniel remembered Ward as a junior analyst who always borrowed pens and never returned them. Now he carried authority like a sealed weapon. "You made physical contact?" Ward asked. "It made contact with me." "That is not possible. Your museum has exhausted that phrase." Ward showed Daniel a city forecast. 41 days ahead, probability variance rose sharply across transport, medicine, weather, and financial networks. Systems were not merely disagreeing. Their contradictory predictions were beginning to occur. 3 days earlier, 2 trains occupied the same platform for 0.4 of a second. Both carried passengers. Neither driver remembered the other train. At a hospital, a patient arrived alive and dead in separate records while her family remembered both outcomes. Rain fell upward over 6 city blocks. "Meridian resonance," Daniel said. "Your original field," Ward replied. Daniel had helped build the Meridian Array to detect decisions with civilization-scale consequence. The project was shut down after Keiko's death, and a laboratory accident that split one technician's memories across 5 incompatible childhoods. "We dismantled the array." "The hardware, yes. Not the global systems trained on its data. Every predictive model now samples unrealized outcomes. The museum believes those branches are synchronizing." "Museums do not believe." Black glass cleared behind Ward. The heroic Daniel stood on the other side. "This one does," Evelyn said. Ward presented an activation protocol. It described the restricted exhibit as an executable branch with unusually high causal coherence. If merged into the present before variance crossed threshold, it would replace unstable outcomes with a future known to survive. Replace, Daniel said, not repair. The distinction becomes academic if our timeline collapses. Who survives the merge? Population continuity exceeds 99.9%. That was not my question. Ward zoomed into Daniel's record. The activation required a causal anchor, the person whose divergence created the target branch. Daniel would enter the museum's core, accept the heroic branch, and allow it to propagate backward through his decisions. His current life would be treated as the error. Anna, alive in target continuity. Leo, Ward looked away. The heroic Daniel placed his palm against the glass. You have 41 days, he said, though the room speakers were off. Alarms sounded across the city. Every display showed 2 times at once. For 6 seconds, Daniel remembered leaving the museum and remaining inside it. He remembered Anna calling and Anna never knowing his name. He remembered Leo at 11 and a small grave marked age 6. Then reality settled. His phone contained 17 missed calls from Anna. One message played in Leo's voice. Dad, something weird happened. I remembered you teaching me to swim, but you didn't. Anna did. I can remember both. Ward lowered his voice. 41 days was the exhibit's projection yesterday. The forecast recalculated. 36 hours. The activation chamber lay beneath the museum's deepest gallery. Daniel descended with Evelyn while Ward assembled a continuum emergency council above. The elevator passed impossible and continued into a level without a name. Did you know the heroic branch was executable? Daniel asked. I knew one exhibit retained growth potential. I did not know it could initiate contact. You invited me into a weapon. I showed you the terms before Continuum showed you only the outcome. The chamber was older than the museum. Rings of dark metal surrounded a chair. Millions of hair-thin light paths entered the walls, each connected to an exhibit overhead. Daniel recognized the geometry. This is meridian architecture. Your architecture. I never built this. Not in this life. The system opened his activation conditions. Target continuity would propagate from the morning he ignored his mother's call. His grief would drive him deeper into temporal research. He would never attend the community concert where he met Anna. Anna would live, marry no one, and direct relief after the collapse. Leo would die in the harbor surge. Daniel would close Meridian at age 58 and die from exposure. The world would continue. It calls this continuity, Daniel said. It is a list of funerals. Every life is a list of funerals viewed from the right branch. He turned on Evelyn. Would you activate it? My unchosen lives are not asking. That is not an answer. No, it is the only honest difference between us. She showed him the ethical record. Continuum had modeled alternatives, but each intervention increased variance. The heroic branch remained the only known survivor. Known, Daniel said. Because it already happened somewhere, because the museum can hold it long enough to transfer. Above them, the city flickered. Through a narrow observation window, Daniel saw daylight switch to night and back. Sirens began, stopped, then began in a different rhythm. Anna called, this time he answered. Where are you? At Continuum Archive. Leo says you are going to erase us. Daniel looked at Evelyn. How does she know? The curator checked the gallery. Leo's probability signature appeared inside the museum, moving downward. She followed your resonance path, Evelyn said. The child should not be able to enter without admission. She has an admission, Anna said through the call. It arrived with her name and another name underneath. The elevator opened. Anna stood inside, soaked from the rain. Leo held a black token. It displayed her birth date, the date of her adoption, and the date of her death in the heroic branch. The activation chamber recognized her. All its lights turned white. Leo looked smaller beneath the meridian rings. She walked to the chair before Daniel could stop her. The system projected 2 versions of her, the 11-year-old in the chamber and the 6-year-old from the heroic timeline trapped behind the window of an evacuation bus. Anna saw both. Turn it off, she said. Evelyn tried. The projection remained. Leo studied the younger child with the terrible attention children reserve for proof adults have lied. "That's me. A possibility." Daniel said. "She looked scared." She was. Anna faced Daniel, and this is the future they want. He explained the collapse, the target branch, and the cost. He expected anger. Anna listened without interrupting, which was worse. "How long have you known?" "Hours." "How long until the city fails?" "Maybe a day, and you promised you would come home." "I thought I would." "You always think intention is the same as truth." The 6-year-old projection struck the bus window. No sound crossed, but Leo flinched. "If Dad saves everyone, I die?" she asked. Anna knelt beside her. "That life already made different choices. But they want to put it here." Daniel said, "Yes. Then I die." No language of continuity could soften it. Anna sent Leo with Evelyn to the elevator. Leo refused until Daniel gave her his admission token. She closed her fist around both tokens and left. When the doors shut, Anna said, "I am not going to tell you one child matters more than the world." Daniel heard the heroic version of himself behind that sentence. "I need you to." "No, because then if you choose us, you can call it love instead of responsibility. And if you choose them, you can call it courage instead of loss. I will not make either choice clean for you." "What would you do?" "I would ask why an institution built from alternatives offers only one." Anna sat against the chamber wall. "When we adopted Leo, they gave us a probability report. It said the placement had a 38% chance of lasting 5 years. You wanted to refuse because you thought she deserved certainty. Do you remember what I told you?" Daniel did. That certainty was what adults promised when they wanted children to carry the risk. "We could not prove we would become a family. We became one by continuing before proof arrived. Do not confuse the absence of proof with the absence of value now." She walked around the chamber, reading the light paths. Each thread connected an abandoned life to the activation chair. "What powers the transfer?" "Probability pressure," Daniel said. "From where?" He followed one thread upward in the system map. It terminated at Keiko's greenhouse, another at the concert hall, millions more spread through the museum. The exhibits were not merely records, they were stored causal energy. "If we activate the heroic branch," Anna said, "what happens to the others?" The chamber answered, "Contradictory paths will be resolved." "Resolved how?" No response. Daniel opened the original engineering layer. Access denied. He used the credentials embedded in his admission token. The system accepted them as founder-level authority. On every wall appeared the same name. Daniel Sato, not visitor, not subject, architect. The city began remembering its alternatives. Above the museum, people stopped in streets as unlived decades entered them. A woman recognized children belonging to a marriage she had declined. A surgeon remembered patients from a career he never pursued. Thousands called people who did not know them. Rain fell through 3 seasons. Warm summer water struck winter coats. Snow melted before touching the pavement. For moments at a time, buildings wore different facades. Trees returned to blocks where roads had replaced them, and the old coastline appeared beneath traffic. At the harbor clinic, Anna's colleagues treated injuries patients remembered receiving in different places. A man arrived with frostbite from a winter that had not occurred. Another carried seawater in his lungs, though he had never entered the ocean. Nurses stopped asking which history was correct and treated the body in front of them. For the first time, Daniel understood that uncertainty did not always prevent action. Sometimes it stripped action of the excuse to wait for perfect knowledge. Continuum declared temporal emergency. Ward ordered the museum sealed. Daniel, Anna, and Evelyn returned to the gallery. Exhibits were opening without visitors. Unchosen selves stood at the glass, not pleading to be activated but looking outward with the shock of prisoners discovering the walls were transparent. Keiko's greenhouse appeared beside Daniel. His mother was gone. On the table lay a note in her handwriting. "You cannot save a world by making IT unable to change." "Did she write that?" Anna asked. She could not know. Neither could Leo know the cost. The concert hall doors opened. Applause flooded the corridor, joined by hospital alarms, wedding music, arguments, ocean noise, and millions of ordinary rooms. The sound was not chaos. It was multiplicity refusing silence. Ward met them at the restricted threshold with security officers. "Activation begins in 20 minutes, he said. "You cannot initiate it without me." The exhibit believes otherwise. Behind the glass, the heroic Daniel had entered his own meridian chamber. He sat in the chair and raised one hand. The museum's light paths brightened. "He is activating from the other side," Evelyn said. Ward ordered Daniel into the chamber to complete the bridge. "If he built this," Daniel said, "then his future may not be evidence of survival, it may be recruitment material." The collapse is happening outside, and it accelerated when the exhibit opened. Ward hesitated. The museum shook. For 2 seconds the security officers became older, then children, then themselves. One dropped his weapon and whispered the name of a brother never born. Anna took Daniel's hand. Their memories overlapped, first meeting at a concert, first meeting at a continuum hearing, never meeting. In one life she hated him, in another they had 3 sons. In this one they stood together while their daughter waited near the elevator. "Which one is real?" Daniel asked. Anna squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. "The one that can still surprise us." The restricted glass dissolved. The heroic Daniel waited inside the memorial plaza. Behind him, the saved city had stopped moving. People stood perfectly still beneath a perfectly clear sky. "Come see what certainty costs," he said. Daniel crossed the threshold. The saved future was silent. No wind moved the memorial birds. Children remained mid-step. The heroic Daniel walked among them like the only living man in a photograph. "You built the museum," Daniel said. "We built it, I only finished first." "Why?" After the collapse, survivors remembered the lives that vanished. Grief destabilized continuity. I needed somewhere to contain alternatives before they reopened. "So you turned them into exhibits." "I gave them form. Without the museum they would have become noise." The older man touched the statue. Images spread through the plaza, cities splitting across outcomes, people dying and returning with incompatible histories, oceans occupying 2 coastlines. Then Meridian closed, the world stabilized. "You saved them," Daniel said. "Yes." "What happened afterward?" The image advanced. Elections produced unanimous results. Markets stopped fluctuating. Couples met predicted partners. Children received careers before adolescence. Accidents declined. Crime disappeared, so did improvisation. "We optimized for continuity," the heroic Daniel said. "Every dangerous divergence became an exhibit before it could be chosen. You imprisoned the future. I removed catastrophe. You removed alternatives." The older man's composure cracked. "Do you think I did not know the difference? I watched possibility kill people by the billion. Choice is sacred only to those who survive its consequences." "And Leo?" "A loss before the solution. Say her name, Leo Marin." The frozen plaza flickered. For an instant, Leo stood among the children, 11 years old, holding 2 admission tokens. The heroic Daniel looked away. "You remember her," Daniel said. "The museum remembers every pressure point required to recruit you." "That is not what I asked." "I remember dreams of a daughter I never met. She called me Dad. For years I believed they were artifacts from discarded continuity. Then she began asking why I had saved everyone except her." The invitation had not been sent by the museum. It had been sent by a guilty man using a museum as a bridge. "You want me to absolve you. I want you to become me before the world breaks." Those are the same request. Around them, the saved citizens turned their heads in unison. Their eyes were open but vacant. "They are alive," the heroic Daniel said. "Can they choose to leave this plaza?" No one moved. "Can Anna choose someone else? Can a child refuse the career assigned to her? Can anyone make a mistake you did not preserve behind glass?" The older man approached until they stood face to face. "A world does not need freedom to be saved. It needs to continue." Daniel heard the logic of oceans, institutions, and frightened engineers. Continuation was measurable. A meaningful life was not. The museum alarm changed tone. Activation threshold reached. The heroic Daniel offered his hand. "You have spent your life mourning choices. I am offering you the last one humanity will ever need." Daniel took the older man's hand. The contact opened the choice engine. He saw the museum not as galleries but as a planetary machine. Every exhibit was a capacitor holding causal difference. Every visitor strengthened the branch by recognizing what had been lost. Regret became energy. Longing became a bridge. At the machine's center lay the heroic timeline, not preserved like the others but feeding on them. Daniel saw Keiko's greenhouse collapse into light. The concert hall followed. Classrooms, marriages, reconciliations, quiet failures, and lives without monuments streamed toward the activation chamber. Billions of alternatives were being consumed to make one future inevitable. The meridian collapse was not branches colliding by accident. It was resistance. The engine showed him what happened to weak alternatives. They were not empty mathematical branches. Each contained awareness for as long as its inhabitants could remember a yesterday and expect a tomorrow. When absorbed, they did not scream in sound. They compressed into impulses of regret inside the surviving population. The museum had called those impulses contamination. They were testimony. Humanity's strange dreams and impossible memories were the last evidence of civilizations optimized out of existence. Possibility pushed back whenever the choice engine tried to close it. The trains on one platform, the living and dead patient, the impossible rain, not symptoms of uncontrolled choice but pressure released by forced certainty. "You caused it," Daniel said. The heroic Daniel's face tightened. "I completed the only branch capable of containing it. The branch exists because you consume the others. The cure and the disaster are the same machine." Above them, Ward began emergency activation. The plaza filled with white light. Daniel felt his enacted memories loosen. Anna at the concert became Anna at a hearing. Their wedding became an empty apartment. Leo at 11 became a 6-year-old behind rain-streaked glass. Daniel pulled away, but the older man held him. "If you break the bridge now, both timelines may fail." "May. There is no surviving model outside mine, because you erase the evidence." Daniel reached through their shared memory to the first meridian equation. As a young engineer, he had assumed probability required selection. Measure enough futures, choose the least harmful, collapse the rest. His mother had challenged the premise over tea. "Maybe the future is not asking you to select it," she had said. "Maybe it is asking you to leave room." He had forgotten that conversation because it occurred the night before she died. The museum had kept it. Daniel redirected the activation energy away from the heroic branch and into the spaces between exhibits. Not enough to enact every life, enough to release them from storage. The heroic Daniel screamed as the frozen city began moving unpredictably. A child dropped a paper bird. Wind carried it somewhere the model had not assigned. "You are destroying the safe future." "No," Daniel said. "I am making it a future again." The older man's hand weakened. Outside, the city fractured through thousands of forms, then slowed. Probability variance climbed beyond every forecast and did not collapse. Systems went blind, trains stopped, hospitals switched to human triage, people stood in impossible rain without knowing what came next. Ward ordered Daniel to restore the target branch. Anna's voice reached him through the engine. "Come home." The heroic Daniel looked suddenly tired rather than old. "If you leave," he said, "you will never know whether your world survives. Neither will anyone else." "That is your answer, uncertainty." "No, uncertainty is not an answer. It is the space in which answers remain changeable. You made one decision immortal because you were afraid to let anyone judge it later." The heroic Daniel looked across his perfect city. A woman in the plaza changed direction for the first time. She stepped off the assigned path, paused as if astonished by her own movement, and followed the paper bird carried by the wind. Other citizens began to move. Some collided. One laughed. Somewhere beyond the memorial, a car alarm started and no system immediately silenced it. Daniel thought of every museum door and every life presented as evidence after the fact. It is the condition that makes an answer ours. He released the bridge. The saved world vanished. Daniel woke on the museum floor with Leo's hand in his. Emergency lights pulsed along the gallery. Most exhibit doors were dark. A few showed ordinary rooms with no people inside. The restricted caption had disappeared. Anna sat beside him. "Which one are you?" He answered with the phrase from their first real argument, one no archive should have valued enough to preserve. "The idiot who put cumin in your coffee." She laughed once and then began to cry. Above ground, the city had not ended. It had lost prediction. For 9 days, weather systems issued ranges instead of forecasts. Markets closed because prices produced no stable future. Continuum suspended automated sentencing, medical allocation, and transport routing. Human beings made slow, inconsistent decisions and discovered how much authority they had surrendered to systems that promised certainty. Some people retained memories of unlived lives. Most faded within weeks. A few changed enacted lives because of them, calling estranged parents, leaving jobs, returning to unfinished work. Continuum classified these changes as post-resonance contamination. The people involved called them second thoughts. Evelyn Rook remained inside the museum until its final exhibit closed. Her last transmission reported that the Unchosen branches had not been destroyed. Their causal pressure had dispersed beyond archival reach. "We can no longer display what might have been," she said. "This may be a loss of knowledge. It may also be the restoration of privacy to the future." Deputy Director Ward survived the inquiry and resigned. The official report credited Daniel with preventing an unauthorized branch overwrite. It did not mention that Continuum had approved the overwrite 17 minutes before he stopped it. Daniel never returned to temporal engineering. He repaired the kitchen window. He attended Leo's astronomy trip and spent most of it cold, bored, and quietly grateful. Anna did not forgive him all at once. Their marriage continued not as proof he had chosen correctly, but as a choice neither could outsource to a museum. 3 months later, Leo brought Daniel a drawing. It showed 2 fathers standing on opposite sides of a glass wall. One wore Daniel's old Continuum coat. The other wore the gray coat from the heroic future. Between them stood a little girl holding a white paper bird. "Who is this?" Daniel asked, pointing to the older man. "Dad from the quiet world. You never met him." "I did when you were gone." Daniel felt the old museum pressure behind his eyes. "What did he say?" "He said he was sorry he made everything safe." "Anything else?" Leo turned the paper over. On the back she had written a sequence of numbers. Daniel recognized a meridian stabilization equation, but one term was different. The new version did not collapse competing outcomes. It allowed bounded disagreement without physical overlap, a method for living beside possibility rather than consuming it. "Where did you learn this?" "He asked me to remember." The heroic Daniel had sent one thing across the bridge before vanishing. Not a demand for activation. A correction. Continuum sealed Leo's drawing in its deepest archive. Tests confirmed the equation could not have been derived from Daniel's published work. It later became the foundation for uncertainty-safe predictive systems, though the institution removed Leo's name from early reports. This entry restores it. The Museum of Unchosen Lives no longer exists at its recorded address. The narrow door now opens into a storage room beneath the closed cinema. On some rainy evenings, witnesses report brass letters appearing on the wall and an elevator moving below the building. No admission tokens have been recovered. Daniel Sato maintains that the museum is gone. Leo, now an adult, disagrees. She believes a museum is not a place, but the moment a person imagines another life clearly enough to grieve it. In her final Continuum interview, she was asked whether her father had chosen the right future. "There was no right future," she said. "That was the trap. He chose one where I could ask him the question." The archive preserves no image of the world Daniel rejected. No population count proves his decision saved more lives. No model can show what certainty would have prevented. There is only the enacted record, a world damaged, unfinished, and still producing alternatives. And sometimes, in the memories of people who stand before doors they have not opened, faint applause can be heard from another room.